Can Jerry Jeudy follow up his first 1,000-yard season with an even better one in 2025? I say yes, and I'll tell you why. Coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, and proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Let me tell you why I believe Jerry Jeudy is poised for an even better season in year 2 with the Browns. Speaking of the wide receiver room, Jamari Thrash has a real chance to produce a breakout season for the Browns, and frankly, they may need him to. And there's an advantage that the Browns have over their division rivals that seems to be causing some real problems this offseason. I do want to thank you for being in every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well, and it's totally free to you. Just make sure you hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcasts, and of course, the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. You can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comment section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. And we all know Jerry Jeudy produced a memorable season last year for the Browns, year 1 with the franchise. He finished with 90 receptions, 1,229 yards, and the 4 touchdowns last year. I think he's actually poised to surpass that in year 2 here in Cleveland. And there's a couple reasons why I feel this way. I think first and foremost, though, there is this debate that's going around or has been had this offseason, I think, about whether or not 1 year of Jerry Jeudy doing this proves that he is a bona fide number 1 wide receiver in the NFL, if he deserves to be in the conversation with some of these other great receivers in the NFL. He was top 5 last year in receiving yards, among the likes of your CeeDee Lambs and some of the other great receivers in this league. And it's an impressive feat. It's an impressive thing to be lumped in or talked about with those guys as one of their sort of peers and on the same playing field as them. So I think he has established himself as that. I feel confident in saying that, but I understand where there's still some hesitations. It's 1 year, want to see more, need to see more. I get all that, but I think Jerry is going to first of all, just with the dynamics of this wide receiver room as a whole, he is the one wide receiver in this offense on this team that whatever, name your quarterback, Flacco, Pickett, Shador, Dylan Gabriel, whoever starting a quarterback, he is the one wide receiver that all 4 of those guys feel confident that they can trust. And frankly, I think you saw that a lot during the spring already. There were some really good really good plays during the spring, during OTAs, during minicamp, where Flacco was out there and you saw him just looking Jerry Jeudy's way no matter what. Really, I think OTAs, the first day we were out there, one of the first throws he made was this really nice ball to Jeudy, double coverage, going across the field, far side, drops it in on a dime to Jerry Jeudy. He is the go-to guy. Kenny Pickett looked the most comfortable when he was running the offense. In a spring where I think he struggled, he looked the most comfortable and confident when he was throwing the football to Jerry Jeudy, when that was the person he was looking to. So there's a comfort there. There is a comfortability thing there. He's the one receiver that should be trusted in this offense. And because of that, he's going to be the safety net. He is going to be the guy that gets gets the first look. He is your Amari Cooper from a year ago, or really the last couple of years, where it was you always knew you had somebody there in Amari that could make the plays that you need to make. And I think Jerry is sort of taking on that mantle, and he's doing a phenomenal job of it. And so I'm excited to see what he does from that perspective. But we've talked at length. I've talked at length, I should say, about the idea that this wide receiver room has, room for improvement. There's some issues there. There's some shortcomings. It's Jerry Jeudy. It's Deontay Johnson, if he buys in fully. And then we know what's kind of behind those two is a bunch of guys that haven't really proven anything in this league. And so when you have at least the one guy that has, the one guy who's coming off of a phenomenal, memorable 1,000-yard season, his first of his career, you do feel that there's more to come in that regard. And I don't believe that it was just like a flash in the pan type thing for him, like some I think seem to think it is at this point. So I'm willing to put my name on the take that I think Jerry is going to have at least a similar replicable season in terms of like the numbers, like the 1,200 yards. I think he's going to have more touchdowns this year, frankly, because again, the offense last year was so bad. It feels like it would be, if he can't score more than 4 touchdowns, I think that the offense is going to be going through some struggles again. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to have a bounce back year. Competent quarterback play, as I pointed to, being a thing that if they get that figured out, they start to trend in the right direction. The offense this team can be better than I think what they were last year, just based off of that alone. So there's reasons, obviously, as we've laid out before, for optimism there. But Jerry is going to be the go-to guy. He is going to be the frontline guy, and in an offense that, listen, they're gonna use the run game as their identity. But even when that was the case in previous Kevin Stefanski seasons, the year Joe Flacco was here in 2023 and he helps lead this team to the playoffs, you had a guy who found a lot of confidence throwing the football, and the run helped set up the pass so much. There was a lot of play action in that scheme, in that offense, and what they were trying to do. That's going to be the case again, and Jerry's going to be the guy he's looking to first and foremost. So I just think no matter what, Jerry is poised for an even better season, at least the same season, but I think better. And I do think that when he goes out there and does it again, I think it's going to be, there's not going to be any doubts about whether or not he is a frontline wide receiver in this league. If he can be that guy that we're talking about, a top target, a top weapon in an offense. And it'll be a cool story for Jerry if he pulls that off as well, because being the player that came to Cleveland via that trade and everything that came with that, all the criticisms, you had the Steve Smith stuff from previously, and he had to he actually, by the end of the season, was walking back his take on Jerry Jeudy, especially after the Monday night game against the Broncos, against his former team, where he just went absolutely bonkers. Like, he had to sort of walk back and take back the things that he had said about him. You had Mark Schlereth saying things about him as well, and whether like he thought he was a bust and all that. Well, goes out and produces you 1,200 yards and 4 touchdowns, a really memorable season, and he shut a lot of people up. He did. And so if he can do it, but now it's about like doing it again. That's the key thing here, right? Because it's one thing to do it once. You do it a second time. Now people, I think, will start to believe like Jerry's that guy. And it will be Andrew Berry. We know his failures in developing wide receiver talent, but in trading for them, he's been money. And if he does it again with Jerry and banks on this young talent that just maybe wasn't in the right situation, he turns out to be a top 10 wide receiver in this league, which I think if he does it a second year in a row, there's going to have to be more conversations about that. Speaking of which, like here at Locked On, we have coming up a big reveal of a Locked On top 100 players in the NFL. And I was adamant that Jerry Jeudy was going to be my top 100 players because I think he proved last year he should be. And so I'm curious to see where he falls when it's all said and done. I'm guessing he won't be in the top 100 because I don't know that a lot of people agree with me on this. But I think by the end of the season, that's going to be undeniable because he's going to put up at least similar numbers to what he did in 2024. But I'm willing to bet that he surpasses it because I think the offense is going to be better. I think being the main guy in this passing attack, he's going to get looked at a ton, and he is going to be so important to the success of this group from a passing standpoint that I think it's hard not to see him. It's hard not to see him at least replicating, but I think surpassing what he did a season ago in his first year with the Cleveland Browns. Speaking of those wide receivers, there's one young wideout who the Browns may be relying on sooner than anybody expected. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends, family, who knows? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize that you want to sit in the stands rather than watch it at home. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it all possible. Last year, I used Game Time for the first time when I bought tickets for my wife and I to go see Ohio State and Michigan. And yes, I know the result was unfortunate. We would have rather seen a win, but we do get to say we saw the eventual national champions in person. And Game Time, in the process of all this, became my new go-to app for buying tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms may apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. So we talked a lot about Jerry Jeudy. We know this wide receiver room is an inexperienced group overall. And I've been predicting for a while now that the Browns are going to make a trade for a wide receiver before the season starts. I still stand by that. I think it's going to happen. I think they'll pull the trigger on something in August, maybe during training camp when they realize, hey, we need some more depth here. But maybe after training camp. Maybe they wait until after roster cutdown day and they get another receiver that way. But I think my main point in that has been, I think the wide receiver group that you see right now is not going to be the wide receiver group that you see entering the season, because I think they're bound to make some sort of addition, if you will, in terms of adding another body, veteran presence to that room that they're lacking right now. But if they don't, if they decide, you know what, we're good, we're gonna see it through with this group, we're going to try and see if some guys can sort of develop here and what we get out of some players like a Cedric Tillman, for example, but also a Jamari Thrash, it's going to be an interesting thing to sort of watch play out. And Thrash is the person I want to highlight here for a moment because, and for this sort of conversation, because Thrash took a ton of reps as the slot wide receiver for the Browns during OTAs and minicamp a couple weeks back, maybe a month or so back now. Coming up on a month, I should say. And so if that trade I keep banking on doesn't happen, he's probably going to be first up for slot reps in this offense and with the first team, which is interesting because, you know, you're talking about a guy who was not a highly drafted player, obviously. He was selected by the Browns as a day 3 pick last year and is basically, you know, those types of players are usually fighting for their jobs in the NFL. You know, going into like years 2 and 3, like year 1, especially with Andrew Berry, you sort of assume, yeah, they're going to make this roster because you're not going to cut a guy that you think can maybe become something for you so quickly. That's also cheap. But, you know, year 2, 3, like nothing's guaranteed for 5th round picks in this league. And so he's now being sort of asked to step into a bigger role and have an even bigger presence. And there were some issues there last year. Like he had some issues catching the football. That was very evident at practice. I will say, and one of the things that I think impressed me the most about him during spring work this earlier this summer was just the fact that you saw a guy who seemed to have made a point and trying to be better about how he catches the football. He's more out in front with his hands. He's trying to make sure he really brings it in. He's trying to make sure he secures the pass. He's not letting it kind of get too close to his body anymore. And there was less drops. There were still a few, but there was a lot less drops than I think what we saw from him last year. And so I think there were signs of growth, if you will, that he is sort of learning here. And the Browns, like they have a lot of confidence in Cedric Tillman, seem to believe that Jamari Thrash can be something for them. And so they're sort of banking on that, at least at this juncture of the offseason and this juncture of their preseason training, that he can become that for them. But as I was saying, if there's no trade, if there's no move made to bolster this wide receiver room, you could be seeing a lot of Jamari Thrash at that slot wide receiver spot. And so it's going to be an interesting situation where he's kind of learning on the fly, being thrown to the wolves here. And in some respects, like, that is the best way to learn. It's like a sink or swim situation. You throw them out there, you see what they can do, and you hope that they blossom with that or if they don't, then you sort of learn what you need to learn about them. But I can understand where that's just the hand that they've been dealt right now. They weren't able to go swing big necessarily on every single need that they had. I was surprised they didn't draft a wide receiver. That was sort of surprising, but we did see them draft Harold Fannin Jr. And I've had a ton of conversations about the fact that, Harold Fannin might be the guy that you're relying on in the slot a lot more, with a lot of 12 personnel, going back to that with Kevin Stefanski's offense, and trying to sort of bridge that for a year at least. Like, hey, can we just rely on Harold Fannin as our pass catcher out of the slot more so than some of these other guys because they're just so unproven? And that might still be the case, and that might honestly be the way that they balance it all anyway. Like, even if they don't make a trade, it might just be, let's use a lot of Harold Fannin. When we're not using Harold Fannin and we're actually using wide receivers, hey, we got Jamari Thrash and we're going to put him out there and see what he can do, and hope that he rises up rather than, flops when he's given more opportunities and thrust out there and sort of thrown to the wolves, if you will. So we'll see what it all looks like. But that is going to be something, especially during training camp, to certainly keep an eye on, preseason as well. See what Jamari Thrash is doing, see what his role looks like, see how much he's being utilized, all those different things, because he is potentially your day one slot receiver in an offense that doesn't have, again, that depth and that experience at the wide receiver position. And, he's either going to develop into something that's more stable and reliable for you, or he's going to sort of just flop and you're going to realize, like, yeah, he's a 5th round pick and that's all he's going to be. And there's still a need there. I don't know that I'm like banking on Jamari Thrash becoming this great player, but we're going to find out. And the preseason might be the most revelatory set up to see him and see what he can do with it and see what he does with the opportunity as a whole. So we'll see what that looks like. But Jamari Thrash certainly is in line to, similar to Cedric Tillman in a lot of ways, like, get these reps and be counted on sooner than maybe some people expected. And it's about what he kind of does with it from here. Again, I'm intrigued by the progress he seemed to have made. I'm intrigued by the commitment he seems to have to getting better and improving upon his rookie season, and trying to embrace a bigger role on this team and in this offense. But I still have some doubts and questions about what it's all going to look like until I see him out there during training camp, during the preseason, and we'll get a better picture, I would say, then. I also don't know for sure, like, the roles at those positions is going to be so fascinating because of the fact that, like, they didn't address it in the draft. They didn't add anybody really of note other than I guess Deontay Johnson, who, and that's the key thing here, is like, Deontay's been an outside receiver most of his career. Is he now willing to? I mean, willing to is an interesting way to put it, because he wasn't willing to go into a game last year. But is he accepting of a slot role? Is that where the Browns kind of envision using him? I don't know. We saw him do a little bit of that during the spring, but I don't know that that's like the number one place they're going to use him per se. Cedric Tillman has to be an outside guy. Jerry actually throughout his career has run a decent amount of slot, but I think they want him as their primary number one guy on the outside. So where does that leave Deontay Johnson? Is he just kind of rotating in on the outside more? Is he going to be more in the slot? How are they going to utilize him? That sort of plays that all sort of factors into this conversation as well. Because if he's your slot guy, he's your slot guy, and then you just kind of go from there. But again, not a role that he's had throughout his career. So where do they sort of slot him in? Does he take on that slot role more primarily, and then Thrash is your backup guy? We'll see. But certainly keep an eye on Jamari Thrash, because he is somebody who, as I said, could be looked at as a bigger priority, a bigger piece, more prominent in this offense than I think people thought he would be, especially going into just year 2 in the NFL after, spotty year 1, where it felt like he was just kind of a 5th round pick that was there, and we didn't get to see a ton. But we're going to get to see a ton of them in the month ahead when training camp commences, and it's going to be worth watching and monitoring to see how he's used and what the Browns kind of have planned for him. There is Myles Garrett's contract situation seems to really be screwing things up for a couple of the Browns division rivals. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. All right, so we're all well aware at this point, Myles Garrett had his standoff with the Browns earlier this offseason back in February, requested a trade, did the whole Radio Row thing. It caused a big scene, caused a big stink. And then by March, free agency was a couple days away from opening up, and he decides, you know what, I'm coming back. And the reason he was coming back was because the Browns gave him a 4-year, $160 million extension. It made him the highest paid at the time, highest paid non-quarterback in football, also the highest paid pass rusher in football. And so he's now set the market. And this is how this works in the NFL. Like the guy that gets paid now lays the foundation, lays the groundwork for the guy coming after him, the next guy, to get paid and what they are going to be asking for and making demands for and all these different things. And so because of this Myles Garrett extension, which, let's face it, like Jimmy Haslam has spared no expense when it comes to building out this roster and being willing to commit money to certain players. He committed money to the wrong player in Deshaun Watson, but he has been willing to spend, and that is worth something in some respects. So when it comes to the Myles Garrett situation, he was willing to pay up. He was willing to make him the highest paid non-quarterback, all those things. And it seems to have now caused all sorts of problems for both the Steelers and the Bengals this offseason. Cincy, well documented, can't seem to get their situation figured out with Trey Hendrickson. And that's been playing out all off season. He wants traded. He wants out. He wants to get a new contract. And since he isn't willing to budge, this is the guy, by the way, who led the league in sacks last year, still playing at a high level despite turning the corner into his 30s. And then the last couple weeks, and this is what sort of I think sparked the conversation here for me. The last couple weeks, we've heard a ton about this TJ Watt situation and how TJ's future with the Steelers is now all of a sudden in jeopardy, which seems weird because the things the Steelers have done this offseason, adding Aaron Rodgers, I know I have my doubts about how good Aaron Rodgers is going to be, but doing something like that, going for it with this quarterback that they believe still has something left in the tank, speaks to a team that wants to still try to win now and thinks that they have a shot. The trade for Jalen Ramsey, even though it was weird in that they gave up Minkah Fitzpatrick, who in some respects I feel like was like maybe better on that team than Jalen Ramsey is going to be. I don't know. We could talk about that another time. But like that also sort of feels like okay, we're pushing the chips in here. We're trying to still win right now. We know this is a chance for us to sort of chase this thing. And so losing TJ Watt would not be a move that incites much excitement or encouragement about the thought that the Browns or the Steelers rather are going to actually have a shot at winning anything and get this monkey off their back where they make the playoffs but they can't get out of the first round. So I think in the end, this probably resolves itself and TJ Watt is still with Pittsburgh, but they have been sort of reluctant to pay guys at times, and you're sort of wondering what's going to happen here. And that's the thing, like TJ, he wants that same, like he wants it. I guarantee you he wants a deal similar, if not more than Myles Garrett. And honestly, if there's a pass rusher in this league who has a case for getting paid like Myles Garrett or in that echelon, it's TJ, because TJ and Myles have kind of had this like rivalry with each other over the years where it's like, well, here's one passing the other, and here's one. Like the last couple of years, it seems like Myles gotten the better of TJ in terms of like proving how good he is. But TJ obviously has the accolades to show for it. Defensive Player of the Year. He's won the sack title, which Myles has never actually done. Like multiple times, TJ's won it, I believe. So he has those things on his resume that's some of them that Myles doesn't have. And so you can guarantee he wants to get paid like that. And so I find it interesting that now the Browns sort of setting that market and being willing to go there with Myles has now sort of thrown a wrench into the defensive end market in general and caused some issues with two of their division rivals that are trying to pay pass rushers of their own. And so it's caused some problems. And listen, like we can criticize the Browns organization for their process on a number of things. We can criticize the Haslams for their process on a number of things. Deshaun Watson, chief among them. We know that trade did not work out. But they aren't afraid to spend. And in terms of overall competitiveness, the other teams in the division do seem to lag behind when it comes to competing financially. And at some point, the hope is that matters, right? Like that once they get the football process all sort of figured out and everyone is on the same page and everything's kind of flowing the way that it should, then you mix in the fact that the Browns can outspend teams because Jimmy Haslam's willing to do it. And that should allow you to be more competitive in terms of signing guys and all those things if teams like the Bengals aren't going to be able to afford it. And that should help you. Now you got to get your franchise quarterback figured out, of course. But like once they get those ducks in a row, the process of paying guys, like the Browns have a major advantage there because their owner is not afraid to spend. And like that is at the root of the entire Deshaun Watson conversation has been, from my perspective, like, yes, you messed this up, but I don't view it as, that was a decision to try to make the team better. That was a decision to try to finally figure out the franchise quarterback position. And so I don't blame them for that. And their willingness to pay guys should be celebrated because at some point that should help you. In a league where you got to put money in escrow once it's guaranteed so that you have it there in case, the league was ever to go bankrupt, which is probably never going to happen. But, that's the whole thought process behind why the escrow thing exists in the first place. Like they were willing to put $230 million in escrow immediately to guarantee it to Deshaun Watson because they thought this guy was going to help get the franchise over the top. Like that's a commitment to winning. And so I do think that at some point will matter once they get the football stuff figured out. But right now, it is kind of interesting to sit back and just watch some of these other teams have some financial issues, if you will, with paying certain players, most notably their star pass rushers, because the Browns, set this market with Myles that for some of these teams might be unattainable or just might not be a place that they are willing to go right now. And so we'll see how it all shakes out. We'll see if TJ Watt is back with the Steelers. My guess is he will be. It doesn't sound like Trey Hendrickson will be back with the Bengals, but we'll see what happens with that because there's still some unresolved things that have to play out there. But either way, the Browns can just kind of sit back and feel good about the fact that they have their guy in tow and they can just kind of move forward with it. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. Just a reminder this week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday again. Last week of that before we go back, 5 episodes a week starting on Monday. And really, we'll be counting you down to training camp. We'll get into some position breakdowns and whatnot because it's just around the corner. It'll be here before we know it. It's going to be here pretty soon. So again, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make us your first listen every day. And for your second listen, you can check out Locked On NFL Scouting or keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being on every day here at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See you.